We're having a historical society program in the town hall, and we're having some local farmers come and speak. This should be a very good program this evening. People are looking at memorabilia and starting to gather.
Tim, looking forward. What a deal. Hi folks, I hope most of you know me. I'm Tim O'Connell, so-called now today Butternut Farm, up at the end of Federal Hill Road on the Hollis line. So I'm sure many of you haven't been up there maybe in years and years and years. Very briefly, my wife and I have been running this farm. I'll get to the historical things just in a bit. Now for 25 years. We've been marketing, most of you might know us from the Milford Farmers Market. So we've been growing love like in 1975. During that was nothing as far as that. Prior to that time, we still had some Baldwin apple trees there. There was some amount of sheep farming, obviously back at the turn of the century, some amount of dairy. Some of you might be aware the Adamses still use that land, actually had some, actually processed and bottled their own milk. We had some great Adams Farm milk bottles. We took them once to the Hillsborough Fair, display cut flowers in, and we lost them. But very, very briefly, that's pretty much the history. My wife and I now basically do this pretty much full time. We do 3 farmers markets. I guess we could describe our operation as part of the new niche agriculture in New Hampshire, which has basically been a mainstay. The amount of Yankee ingenuity that's gone on today to try to make somewhat of a living in agriculture has been a challenge. We deal with that a lot, by the way, in Concord. I have a Concord hat on sometimes. Some of you might realize as well. But how we can make agriculture in New Hampshire sustainable is a challenge. And my wife and I have been trying to do that now for a quarter century. So it's kind of fun.
How many acres?
Actually, total right now, we only have 20 acres. Originally, it was more than that, but back in the 70s, the president of the Co-op Bank, Dick D'Amato, didn't quite feel that he could allow us that kind of a mortgage. Plus, that's a key thing. Plus, many of you know Oliver Merrill. And at that time, that's kind of a fast story. Because I was an educator, most of you know I was a teacher at Milford High. So for fun on weekends, I used to milk cows for Mary Waterman in Amherst. And therefore it made the Oliver Merrill connection. And so Oliver and Mary, frankly, they helped us out financially to buy the place. Oliver Merrill came up and said, no way, nobody's going to ever build on that land that's useless. So we just went with the 20 acres. Within a year, there were 3 houses. That's it. Okay, thanks.
Have we anybody here from the chapels? Didn't come. Well, actually, it's going to be Stan Trumby and his son Steve for one both up here. So, well, if they work together, you can get a farm out. So come on up and tell us what you find. Tell us how you started and well, everybody wants to know.
As soon as my family heard that I was going to be here, they all came. Anyway, I'm not sure how much I can tell you, but I guess most of my farming has been done on North River Road, so I'll tell you a little bit about the beginning.
Years ago we started and how you come to sense of what's happening since we first started.
When I first started farming along,
Right, yeah,
I was going to just mention that my folks moved up on North River Road can recall the kitchen having a hand pump and an old shallow steel sink. Had an outhouse in the back, not much in between, not much bedroom area. There were 4 of us, brothers, stuck in one room. Eventually there were 5 in the same room. So we had 2 double beds, and then eventually we put in a little single bed. So we went from there, and we farmed there a little bit. Well, I started school, so I guess I didn't do a whole lot there until later on. We had all the cows for home use and pig and so forth. I remember when my dad used to kill a pig, we'd draw strips of blood and make blood sausage and then make pig's feet, and there wasn't much use to, not much waste to a pig. So, and there wasn't much money either. My dad had 2 jobs, he made, I think, $18 a week on each job. Well, before we moved out of there, there were 8 of us. It wasn't a lot. So, I remember Northern Road, I think at that time, every place on the road that I can remember had 1 cow, some of them a little bit more, some of them sold a little bit of milk, some of them just had it for their own use. I remember Earl Pitcher's brother had a milk route. I can remember seeing him going by with his express truck, sort of, loaded with milk. And Bernie Bishop had the farm there with cows, and eventually, later on, all the farmers then just put all the milk in steel 24 jugs or 44 jugs, and you have to cool them in water with ice in the tank. I remember Bernie Bishop used to wild stock pick up my milk and others along the way. I'm not sure, I think he took it to some creamery in Nashville. So that's the way it was, and it's a lot different now.
So what time did you get up in the morning? How many cows did you have? Before you went to school?
Hell, I know. Yeah, I do. Usually I got up not too early, and I stayed in the barn late enough to miss the bus. And I was very happy in the barn, and my dad used to work on the pitch farm. I remember, and I thought that was great up there. They had a larger farm at that time than we did.
How many cows did you have, sir?
I'll tell you, the farm I'm on now, I bought in 1950. And at that time, it was primarily a poultry farm. And I raised broilers, which I had been doing some on my dad's farm before I went up there. And I had 6 cows first. The barns there were very run down and poor condition. So I pretty much raised poultry, and then I went to the poultry house up where the Daniels later lived. And now I guess it's at least her husband lived there. They have a bunch of horses. So then I had a few cows, and eventually the poultry business got worse and worse. The broilers prices went down, and the breeding companies got into business, so it made it harder. So I repaired the barns and added to the dairy yards, bought machinery. And then Steve got old enough, and he pushed me along, so we got bigger and bigger. When I first started, I didn't have a tractor. I had an old jitterbug. I made a sort of an old tractor out of an old pickup truck, cut it down, and put big tires on the back, chains and so forth. I hauled the horseback with that. But eventually we had to, as we got more cows, I also added land. Fortunately, the land was pretty much more than the land that I had already bought in the original farm. So we bought machinery to cut the hay, and then we bought eventually corn harvester, and then we bought a big harvester, and then we got the big buy a bigger tractor to run the harvester, so that's get skyrocketed, I guess, so it's inspired that bigger you get, then you get bigger stuff, and eventually, I guess, in the 70s, the beer was built for 64, I guess, we built a large three-stall barn. At one time, I had 400 head there. There was about 200 milk and eggs and growing heifers and dry cows and so forth. So, acres of land, I had somewhere around 100 acres around the main farm, and I used a lot of land, and acres land in Milford and Ferguson's and land up through all the beautiful routes I went to the old wino farm. And I guess, I'm not sure if things have improved much as far as making money on the farm, but I was happened to run across the old milk statement I got, the last milk statement I got for selling milk. I should have mentioned that I sold my herd through the government buyout program in 1986. And the last milk I shipped was in August of 86, and the last check was, I got in September, I got $13.56 a hundred, which is,
You retired.
yeah, the milk price has been more than that, and it's been less since then. It's about 28 cents a quart, and it's $1.12 a gallon, which I often compare milk to a beer. I don't know why, but I know people pay $5 or $10 for a six-pack of beer, which is 72 ounces, I guess, in most cases, and you get $1, $2 or $3 for a gallon of milk, 128 ounces worth of value. People don't seem to realize that. Anyway, I guess I don't think I can forecast the future too accurately, but I guess lack of land is going to be a problem. I know the thing that a lot of you just recently probably all know about is the sale of a great piece of land right next to the driveway that's being built on. I saw Mr. Bolt one time, the planning board came up there, I remember to look the situation over. One of the girls asked me what else could be grown on this field other than hay for cows. I think Dick Haslam told that he didn't see much value in hay or a great field that could be, he first only built 12 or 13 houses. I've often thought since I should have mentioned that you can grow almost anything on that same land or any other land around here. You can buy almost all the vegetables you see in the supermarkets, except probably bananas, which is a fruit and orange, and we couldn't do that very well. Anyway, I think maybe sometime when people realize that all the good stuff doesn't go in the back storage rooms of the supermarkets, maybe they'll realize more of the value of local land. So what else can I tell you? If you have any questions? Maybe I'll let you.
Yeah. Your son is Steve.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder how you two behaved in school.
I went to school with Stanley. Now and then I could smell the farmer. You know what? We used to kind of laugh, but I never, during the Depression, I never saw a skinny farmer.
You know
No,
what he was talking about when he was talking about the difference between the beer and the milk?
No,
The value in it?
no, I used to sell beer, but I never saw
I'll tell a few stories that I've heard through the years.
Steve, do you go in the farm and make money yourself?
stump farming. Yeah.
Well, why don't you give us a little detail of what you're doing out there with the farmers and now what we're doing to try to make the farm?
Well, I'm gonna tell a couple stories about that.
Okay, yeah, I can
Yeah, I know, that's why I was trying to get out of here, you know, so loosen up. Some of the things that kind of amazed me through the years is Dad's family moved down here from Barry, Vermont in 1919 with 2 covered wagons. And it took them, I don't know how long. Dad wasn't born yet, so he probably doesn't know either, but they landed in Lineborough, and he was born a couple months afterwards, I guess, and then shortly after that they moved into Milford. That was Amherst, I guess it was Amherst. His father bought the old Harlow Kennel farm down in Amherst there, and it's all condos now. Paid $5,000 for it, built a stone wall, put in a flush toilet and a well, and sold it 3 times as much money as we thought they were getting. Today it's a multi-million-dollar place, but when he was living in Federal Hill, the story that kind of hit me kind of funny was they moved out of there down to Spalding Street, I think, that farm, and they were going back and forth to clean out the house, and Dad really liked it up there, I guess, and they got up there to load the stuff out of the barn. The house was completely empty. They couldn't find him, and they were getting ready to leave. They went out through the house, and they found him up in the closet with his shoes that he had on in his closet. Said, "Dad, I'm home." Didn't realize that it was not his home anymore. But we had 400 cows in '85, sold out the buyout, and I started soil land. Started doing construction work, and still doing a lot of repairs in the farm and so forth. And I guess the other thing that I can really add is that the changes in farming, other than the fact that there's a lot of land being used up for houses, is we used to travel into Amherst and Merrimack, and Mount Vernon, Lineborough, Wilton, to get enough fields to keep 400 head fed. And today, the biggest problem with that would be if we had 400 head is trying to get to those places because of the traffic, which would make it up there in time to get any work done. That's for sure. It's really a problem with the traffic. Sean will justify that. He's been sputtering about the houses on North Hill Road now that we helped create, and part of our woodland was you can't get off the side of the road with the north square to get across to get on the other side of the field from the north. So. But there are a lot of changes, and hopefully that we can all live together with those changes. Keep some open space so we can't keep farming as long as it's economically feasible, which is going to be harder all the time. I think the major plan for New England is not for farms, but for industry and housing. So the trend is to get bigger in the west and import all our food, not having farms in this area unless it's, like Tim said, it's a type of a niche deal. If you can create a program on your own that will justify you keep farming and make a living on it, but it's not going to be, many of them will be just 1 or 2 left, I'm afraid. So I guess that's really about all I have to say. More Sean to speak.
Third generation, I guess. 8 years ago, I started the milking herd back up again. I was milking, started with 30, and I was up to 70 cows. I had facilities there, and I was out of college, so I figured I'd give it a try and see what we could do with it. We didn't have the land to use to support more cows or the labor. Not only land as well in southern New Hampshire, but people that want to milk cows is hard to find too. So I was able to start with a herd size I could handle myself and go from there. I've also added a farm stand and a greenhouse to kind of add some extra income coming in at different areas. Kind of diversify is kind of the key word of agriculture also. It's niche markets, but you also got to diversify rural milk. Sell some milk and sell some beef and sell some crop, hay to the horse industry, and vegetables and flowers. And hopefully we can get a little bit of good years out of all of them. Because usually you have good years on one commodity and other commodity is a bad year. So you kind of justify the ups and downs out of that. Recently, I've added a partner for the business, and we're going to actually double our herd size. We're going to start going up to about 110 in January. We won't have enough land base to support that many cows, but we're going to buy cheaper feed, not cheaper feed, but we can buy feed in concrete areas, so big farms that have surplus feed that we will haul down just to supplement with the crops that we grow at our farm. You farm nowadays commercially, because you like to do it. Try to make a profit, make a living, and go from there. It is hard now to make a dollar farming. My grandfather said his last milk check was 13 and some change in 1985, and the same January this year, without the dairy compact, it's going to be about $13.50 to $14. The dairy compact that we've had in the Northeast for the last 5 years has helped dairy farmers tremendously. It's kept the floor of the price for milk, so it didn't drop below a certain level, which has saved a lot of small farms, and that's what it was designed for, and it did not get reinstated this September. It was up for renewal, and with the September 11th tax, it didn't get reapplied because Congress was too busy dealing with those problems. There is legislation in the Congress now to try to add it to some bill, and we're going to try for a national one, so that everyone in the country will get some money from that. That should help dairy farmers. Farming is an industry where you buy most of your inputs retail, and you sell your commodity wholesale. That's the way most farming is. You go to the hardware store, you don't get much of a break when you need to buy some nails or some paint or whatever, but when it comes out of your product, you're selling it for a lot less money.
You talk about $13 milk being the same in 1985. I can remember being almost the same as that 65. And we bought a tractor in 1966, but a brand new tractor was almost $500 tractor. It was $5,000 on a big $6,500 brand new. And today, that same setup is probably looking at $75,000 to $80,000. And the interest rate on that plus is still getting $13 because it's not sell junior income. It really hasn't justified it. The one thing that does say that the cows now, and probably the efficiency of the cow is waiting until it's one back then.
I think my dad and grandfather milk, when they had about 18,000 pound herd average. Each cow would give between 14,000 pounds of milk per year. I was milking my herd. I was milking 3 times a day 3 years ago, and we were pushing 28,000 pounds per cow per year. So there's a lot of technology has come a long way in the last 30 years of dairy farming. Different uses of kind of feeding the cow differently with different forages and grains and additives to help produce a greater amount of milk per cow. And that's the way you're able to do it. Like my 70 cows would give as much as the 140 cows would give it, so that way your investment per cow is less. Your investment per 100 pounds of milk is less theoretically because you only need to have 1 cow rather than 2. So that has helped. But technology costs money, so you're kind of costing more to do it too.
Where do you sell your milk?
My milk currently goes to Agrimart, which is a marketing. It's it's a cooperative owned by dairy farmers. We actually own the Cabot name also. We own the Cabot cheese, and the Agrimart. They take our milk and they'll sell it to anyone at our load of milk here in town. Walker Fish sells his milk to this company too. It goes mostly to Friar's Ice Cream. This Agrimart is kind of a dealer of milk. They have a plant also down in West Springfield where they make butter and powdered milk. Kind of a balancing plant when there's no one else in the area that needs fluid milk, they'll take it down there and make powder and butter out of it. There's Agrimart is throughout the Northeast. They've got farms in New York, the state also, Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. I think it was about 5 years ago they bought the Cabot cheese plant up in Cabot, Vermont. And it's they added that to do a value-added product. They were selling wholesale to buyers, to people who needed fluid milk. They wanted to have a brand name that we could make money and get the profit from it. So we bought the cabinet plant, and we've done very well with it.
Yeah, no wonder a cabinet, Buddy's ice cream is going so good.
That's right. But our milk goes wherever it needs to go. We sell it to this company called Agmark, and they will sell it to Westland if Westland needs it. They'll sell it to Colombo Yogurt if Colombo Yogurt needs it.
Any questions? Anybody? I think you did a very good job. Thank you. Now we're getting to know a little bit what farming was about. We got 2 or 3 more. I think they can give us some pretty good stories. Walker Fitch, is he here? Yeah. Custer Fitch Farm, I think the biggest farm there is in town right now. I believe he's going to with so many cows he's got. What time he gets up in the morning? He likes being a farmer or making no money. Loves it.
I've never done a talk in front of people before, so this is my first time doing this. Well, we definitely have been here the longest. My father and grandfather couldn't make it. Their apologies. They wanted to, but somebody had to stay home and milk cows, and my grandfather had a ranch meeting. Anyway, so I had to actually go back in the town history, look in the books and find out information because, well, I guess in 1733, the farm was granted by the General Court of Massachusetts in the town of Duxbury for a grammar school. And it was named the Duxbury School Farm. That's before Fitch's ever owned it or anything. It consisted of about 500 acres. And I don't know exactly, I have an idea where the boundaries are, but back then the boundaries weren't exactly marked with the way they are today. Not everything's written down. It's like it begins with a white oak. It was marked with a heap of stones near it. So I mean, that white oak and heap of stones probably aren't there anymore. Also, the river's changed course over the years, so it's hard to tell exactly where it is. It's a lot smaller than 500 acres now. Somewhere along the line, Ebenezer Pierce. I don't know if the house was built when he bought it, or if he bought the land and built the house, I'm not sure. But anyway, he owned it, and Walker Fitch is one named after. He was born in 1831. Yeah, I know. That was pretty good for my age. But anyway, he was the son of Josiah and Bessie Greenwood Fitch, and he came from Marlborough, New Hampshire, on November 1st, 1858. And bought the land on Ebenezer Pearson for $7,000. And right in front of the farm, it's now state property. The state fish hatchery owns it. We used to own that. That's about 24 acres. So it's about 24 acres smaller than it used to be. But then we've added on to the land base a little bit. We bought some land in Limeville, woodland, just to keep it open. As the economists were saying, development, it's coming into the area, and we try to preserve some of it. Open space. Walker Fitch lived on the farm. I'm not sure. Everybody back in those days had cows. I don't know how many, if he was considered a dairy farmer or not. I don't have that information. I'm sorry, but he had raised a family, and he sold it to his son, John Fitch, and moved to town where he lived to be 69 years old. He passed away. So then as more information comes in on John Fitch, he lived and worked the farm by milking cows and raising chickens. I think at one time he had 2,000. Here's Earl Fitch now. Come on.
We got a clipping in the paper there about this man's business.
Oh, you did?
Go ahead. How do you want to understand?
Well, this is my grandfather, Earl. So now we got two. Anyway, John Fitch, his father, lived and worked the farm by milking cows and raising chickens. I guess one time he had 2,000 chickens, is that right?
Well, my father had 1,000 laying hens, and he hatched the eggs with under hens. He didn't have incubators.
So that's how he made his living. He raised a family of Wallace, Guy Fitch. I don't know if any of you know Guy. He was around. He passed away. Yeah, they're always his family. He passed away at about 101. And then John Fitch, and then Earl. He's the baby of the family. Things are a lot different nowadays than they were back then. Now we all farm with tractors and implements on the back. But back in those days, John Fitch had 3 horses. 2 of them were for work, and 1 was for rested, or if somebody needed to go into town or whatever, they could hitch him up to the cart and go to town. I guess back in those days, late 1800s, early 1900s, they had mowing machines where it was horse-drawn, and you'd sit on the mowing machine, and they would just have a cutter bar, 2 big iron wheels, and cut the hay down. I guess that was run by 2 horses.
Yeah, that was true, but they did have some with 1 horse. We more than a lot of times had 2 horses. So we had a longer cutter bar with 2 horses.
And more horsepower. I guess I have to explain the definition of tedding the field. That's when after it's mowed down and you want it to dry so you can bale the hay, you have to scatter the hay around so air and any moisture, so the sun can get to it and dry it so you can bale it. Now we have implements that we drive behind the tractor and it teads it out, scattered it. And I guess back in his father's day they used a pitchfork to move it around. And over, I don't know how many acres they did, but it doesn't sound like much fun. 20 acres in a summer, and it's in a summer, which doesn't sound like much, but I guess when you get done, after a while they got a tedder powered by 1 horse, and they'd come along with a dump rake, all horsed, drawn, and break it up in a pile. And I have pictures of some of the stuff I'm talking about. They have then to pick the hay up, this was before baling hay, I suppose. At least with this, they'd pick it up with a pitchfork and put it on a stake wagon, which I have a picture of that over there. And then it was brought to the barn and then pitchforked into the barn, way up on top, of course. Let's see, the cows would be in the middle. Down below, in the cellar would be where the manure would fall, and up on top would be on the hay. So the hay would fall down and work its way through and turn into milk and manure on the way down. This was done up until the 40s, and then I guess they had some problems with the horses, and Earl bought his first tractor. Then after time went by, equipment was replaced with tractor power. You could get more area done in a shorter period of time, and you didn't have to feed a tractor or wait for a tractor to rest or pay a vet bill or anything like that. That's what you had to put gas in it, but less retrieved. But anyway, back to John. I don't want to get off topic. When John was milking, he had 12 milking cows. And milking was all done by hand into a pail and then poured into the strainers into the milk jugs that the tromblies were talking about. Before the tanks. maybe I think the jugs were put into tanks or holding tanks that had ice around them to keep them cool.
Before, they were 8-quart cans, and they used to put the milk down in a wood trough, and with spring water, and that was how they cooled the milk. Put the whole can right into the water, and it wouldn't bung the thing. Put the bung in tight, and then sunk it right in the water, and no ice.
No ice. Spring water, cool.
Milk will keep good though, if you look at it right away.
My father, he tells me stories about it. He remembers when they had the milk jugs and the strainers, and you know how we're always worried about bacteria, how clean the milk is. There's a piece of hay, the milk's no, and the milk's no good. He remembers telling when they used to pour the milk in the strainers, they had to move away the flies and everything so the milk would flow through. So it's amazing we're all alive, I suppose.
I'll tell you a story. I won't mention any names. Oh, they can hear all right. They can hear all right. I won't mention any names, but I went to a place one time and a couple of guys were there, and they had some milk in a pail. They had a pail, a can full of milk, and they had some more left over in the pail, and the flies were thicker than fleas, and these two guys were talking a while, and after a while they said, "How much you give me for the milk?" And they dickered and made a deal, and one of them bought the milk anyway. Well, in that pail in the bottom, the part of the pail full of milk, there's more flies than the bottom of the pail was more. You couldn't see the milk. They dumped it into the jug and then it went to market. And then they were, one of them went spreading dry bedding around under the cows, and there was this dry bedding like they have in a furniture place. You know, it's almost like powder, and the other one was throwing hay down the top of the head, and all the dust and they were still milking, and there must have been a lot of bacteria there. Just didn't kill anybody.
It's better today. It's scary. It's better today.
The cows don't even see the milk.
No, the milk doesn't even see the air. It goes straight, right from the cow right into the cooling tank. Never see the air. We actually get a little more of the milk is bacteria, so we try to do the best job we can. Every penny counts. Later on, John got a milking machine, and I guess the average is milking a cow by hand is about 20 minutes. With a machine, it's about 5. So obviously, that's why we have a machine.
There were some guys who would milk 12 cows an hour, but
I did that once.
they didn't do it.
No, I didn't.
John later passed away and gave the farm to his youngest son, Earl, in 1950. Earl raised the family, David, Danny, Brenda, and Linda. Brenda's here. The lady blushing right there. Let's see. Actually, the barn that Earl started started in was like the barn I was saying, it had 3 stories. Back then you could get away with wooden floors. If you take a 1,200 to a 1,500 pound animal on a wooden floor that goes to the bathroom all over it, after a while the cows started falling through, so the state decided that was unacceptable, and now all farmers had to have cement floors. So Earl decided, rather than just get out, he continue and expand his herd. In 1957, he built a new barn. The barn that if you go by, is still there today. It's a long barn. It was called a tie stall. The cows were tied, 25 cows on each side. And he started milking with 2 machines with pails, so that the cows' milk would go directly into the pail. Then you carry the milk into the milk room and pour it into the strainer. A lot of labor, but cows didn't exactly make as much milk as they do today. He had a 300-gallon full tank. We have a 1,000-gallon full tank. Trombley's have a 2,000-gallon full tank. So things are a little different. Earl then later on decided he'd advance further, and he bought a dumping station where instead of carrying the milk all the way down to the milk room, the dumping station would follow. It had wheels like a little wheelbarrow, and you dump it into there, and it would drain with a pump, and a hose would run all the way into the tank, into the milk room. In 1979, he decided he'd go a little bit further, and he put a pipeline in. So instead of a dumping station, you hitch the machines to the pipeline. The pipeline runs right into the barn, right into the cooling tank, into the milk room. So now the milk never sees the air, ever. And he also decided to get more units, so instead of, I think he had, maybe 4, he decided to have 6 units. He milked 1 cow, and then retired from milking after he put the pipeline. Let his son David Fitch take over. He was born July 2nd, 1941. David then did all the milking and took over the farm on that end of it. Earl also kept his fingers in the pie by helping with the field work and running the finances. I was born January 13th, 1974, went to school and came into the business permanently at age 21. I've always worked on the farm as a farm kid. I decided to make it my livelihood at 21. Formed a partnership with David and Earl in 1994. We farmed in Earl's barn until 1999, and that was starting to get run down. And we decided we have to get bigger again or get out. So we decided to build a new barn. And that's a big greenhouse barn that you probably wonder if we're raising plants. But it's the newest thing. We studied it for about 4 years because we were skeptical. We were wondering if we could handle the snow load and all that. We checked out a farm for 4 years and went on the worst weather conditions to see what it was like and talk to people. And decided it was a good idea. It's a lot cheaper than building a wooden barn. Also a lot more light. It's about 152 feet long and 66 feet wide, and that's only half the barn. We still have 2 more hoops to build, hopefully, if everything goes well. And we'll put all our heifers in there, so there won't be any heifers out in the weather in the wintertime. So we went from a tie stall to a free stall. Cows aren't tied up anymore. They run around free. The only time they come in, the only time they're tied up at all is when they're milking. Because you can't really chase them around when you're trying to milk them. So, make it interesting, I know. But, in the year 2000, we decided that what we were doing was using my grandfather's barn and bringing the cows in. We expanded from 50 to 70. So we'd bring in 50 cows, and then kick them out, and then bring in the next 20. And that was extremely time-consuming. And it still took 2 people to milk, and we figured that was unacceptable, so we decided in the year 2000 we'd make another investment, and we built a parlor. It's a double 4 flat-line parlor. The pipeline that my grandfather put in, with 6 units and 2 people, used to take about 2 hours to milk 50 cows. Now with this new parlor, we can milk 40 cows an hour. We have 8 units with automatic takeoffs. When the cows are done, the machines come right off. Trombley's have already had that sort of system. It's a different system. They get a pit parlor. We have the cows step up in our parlor and Stanley's parlor that he put in, you step down, so you're below the house. Little different, but still, they both work satisfactory. So we hope to continue. We like it here. We've been here a long time. We've had all kinds of neighbors move up behind us, and we haven't had any problems. They're really good people. We were really scared because they started putting $250,000, $300,000 houses behind us, and we figured, well, we're going to have a smelly farm on one of their cookout days, and they're not going to like that too much. But we haven't had any problems at all. I'm really thankful for that. But we can, hopefully we can continue and work together, and I like the idea of there being 2 farms in the town, and I hope we can keep it that way. Anything you want to add? Probably said it all. Probably happy to sleep.
What the hell's the matter? So he said, squeeze a little harder. So when big, that cow was kicking like mad. That was the end of my farm. Then I used to bring the milk into the house, in my yard, and make butter, cheese, and they would drink it right from the cow. And she lived to be almost 102. And then, of course, he had a few chickens, too. Said, would you go out and get me some eggs? He had about 200 or 300 chickens. So I went out. I was going easy. And this one here picked me pretty good. I started bleeding. I picked it up and I threw it. I killed the poor thing. I didn't even know it. My uncle said, hey, we're missing the chicken. I said, yeah, he ran away. Okay, the next one we had Dennis Wheeler, and I think he can tell us quite a story, because there were 5 in the family. They were all hard workers. Come on.